Hello, fourth grade. This is Module 5, Lesson 13, Application Problem, and a short introduction to the lesson. Make sure you have your whiteboards out if you don't, and follow along with the lesson. As usual, you can pause or come to me with any questions you have. All right, fourth graders, we're going to read our application problem for Module 5, Lesson 13. So let's read the problem first. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds went for a run. Mr. Reynolds ran 6/10 of a mile. Mrs. Reynolds ran for 2/5 of a mile. Who ran further? Well, we're going to show that on our number line here. And we have our benchmarks of 1/2 and 1. And of course, 0 on this end. So who ran further? Well, let's figure out where Mrs. Reynolds ran. We know that Mrs. Reynolds ran 6/10 of a mile. Well, if we look at 6/10, we know that that numerator is greater than our denominator, which means a half is 5/10. So is the equivalent for half. So we know that 6/10 has to be greater than 1/2. Not by much, but greater. So we're gonna put 6/10 on our number line. So let's get 6/10 written on our number line here. Let me erase it here. So we know 6/10 must fall right in here someplace. So this would be 6/10. Our other fraction is 2/5 of a mile. Well, if we know that half of 5 would be about 2.5, so we know it's less than half. So, but not by much. So we're thinking that 2/5 would be right in this area. So here's our 6/10 in that. So who ran farther? Well, that we know that if Mr. Reynolds ran 6/10 of a mile, he ran farther. So we can explain this by saying that Mr. Reynolds ran farther than Mrs. Reynolds. I know this because 6/10 of a mile is more than half, and I know that 2/5 of a mile is less than half. And we can show this in another way by saying that if I divide this by 2, if I divide 6 by 2, this equals 3/5, and 3/5 is greater than 2/5. So I can show it two ways. All right, move on to the next problem. All right, fourth graders, at this point, please get your whiteboards out. Pause the video, get your whiteboards out so we can start our next video. Okay, I'm assuming that you have your whiteboards out. We're going to compare two fractions. We're going to compare the fractions 7/8 to 6/4. And we can look at this in two ways. We can compare this. If we take this 6/4 and we make this number bond, we know that 4/4 plus 2/4 would equal 7/4. We also know, in this way, we know that this is equal to 1. So this fraction really equals, this bond would equal 1 and 2/4. Therefore, if we really graph this out, we know that that one's larger. Okay? Now let's look at it on a number line. We can look at it on a number line, and this is where we're going to see this for the first time. We're going to change our benchmarks, and we're going to have 0 over here, 1 in the middle, and 2 over here. If we look at the last problem, that we know that 7/8 would go right about here. And we know that 6/4 was 1 2/4. So, and 2/4 would be half of, or translates into 1/2. So we know that right here would be 6 1/4. And we can look at this one. Let's look more closely at this and why we put it here. We know that, again, when we broke it into a number bond, we ended up with 1 2/4. Well, we know that from our equivalent fractions that this equals 1 1/2, which would be right here. All right. So let's look at one other fraction here. The fraction. Go ahead and write these two fractions on your whiteboard and then pause. So we have 5 3/4 and 9 1/5. So 9/5. Go ahead and write those on your whiteboard and we'll wait for you. Alright, let's break these down into our number bond. That we know that 3 over 3, and then that would leave left over 2 over 3. And then we break this number bond, 5 over 5, which equals 1. And then we have 4 over 5. And that would be our number bond for there. So if we went, we would do this and make this 1 2/3, and this is 1 4/5. So we have to compare them and write that. We have to compare them, and if we look at it, 1 4/5 is going to be greater than 1 2/3. Again, we would draw that. We go to our next step. On our next step, we're going to plot that same thing out on a number line. We have to make our new benchmarks because we're above 1 on our benchmarks. If we look at this benchmark, that we would do this as 9/5 would be right about there because that's very close to 10/5, and 5/5 would be right about there on our number lines. So we've completed that process. Now I'm going to have you watch another video to continue this process and then go on to a class kick. See you soon.